And brief.
Perhaps, as well. But it also, I think, fits what Mass LBP is all about, too, which is engendering kind of dynamic conversations and discussions with cross-sections of the public. And we were excited when we just kind of cast out this first invitation to the internet. We hope some interesting people will come, and we started to read the registrations. People here from such a wide range of organizations and interests. So there's some friends in the audience, which are always a pleasure to see, but there are a lot of new faces as well. So I hope you will introduce yourself and have a chance to mingle and pick up on some of Paul's ideas afterwards. So Paul and I have actually known each other for 6 or 7 years now, and we met in the UK. We were both working at a think tank called Demos. And at the time, I was there a little bit before you were, and I was quite intimidated because Paul had just put out this very smart pamphlet called Open Policy, and it was beautifully presented. It came from a group that he was working with before called Forum for the Future. And we weren't quite sure what to make of this guy because he was all about the internet, and he was talking about many of the ideas that we were, but I frankly think in more sophisticated ways. So he added a ton to Demos, and we continued to learn from him in his time there. To give you a sense of the publications that Paul put out, Better Humans, The Politics of Human Enhancement and Life Extension, Independent Living, The Right to be Equal Citizens, The Pro-Am Revolution, cited by the New York Times Magazine 2 years ago as one of the big ideas of the year. How enthusiasts are changing our society and economy. Disorganization, why future organizations must loosen up. Disableism, how to end the last prejudice. Network logic, who governs in an interconnected world. The long game, how regulators and companies can both win. And London Calling, how mobile technology can transform a city. So if you're able to write pamphlets about that range of topics, you know that as an individual yourself has to be pretty connected. Since leaving Demos 2 years ago,
3
years ago, he's gone on to found something called, I love this title, the School of Everything. And if you haven't visited their website, I suggest you do.
Yeah.
Because you're certain to learn something. The School of Everything. But the School of Everything has been described by Boing Boing as an eBay for knowledge and learning. And what it does is act as a clearinghouse, a marketplace connecting learners and teachers. I could have asked Paul to talk just about the future of education, but some of you will have seen the documentary that he featured in a few weeks ago here in Toronto when we had the British director Ivo Gormley present a fabulous new documentary called Us Now, all about internet mass collaboration and the future of government. Paul was one of the talking heads and did a turn as a pundit. And so among all of the other things he's been thinking and writing about, one of his principal preoccupations today is the future of government. He got himself quoted in the documentary saying, I think maybe representative democracy assumes that we're all just a bit thick.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a very good place to start with his remarks, to pick up everything that might have been left on the cutting room floor, to work out some of the implications of that documentary and give us a sense really of what Web 2.0 and this mass collaboration means for municipal government, means for citizens interacting with the state, with public institutions, with all that good stuff. So I'm giving you the floor. We're going to go for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that.
Oh, less than that. I think.
Less than that.
I want to get the talk going.
Get the talk going, and we are recording this a little bit, so you'll have a chance to watch it afterwards or send it to friends if you think it is something worth passing along. So that's good. Anything I missed?
No, that's absolutely that's an amazing introduction.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever had an introduction like that.
Good.
So first of all, I just have a straight admission, which is quite unfashionable these days, I think, which is that I'm an optimist. I am a complete optimist. I think that individually we're getting cleverer. I think as groups we're getting smarter and better at solving problems, and that basically technology is helping us to do better things in the world. So just sort of have that in the back of your mind when you're listening to some of these ideas, because that's where I'm coming from. I'm an optimist. And this talk basically stems from some of the things I've learned since I left Demos about trying to make kind of positive ideas about how you change the world using technology into reality. So through School of Everything and something else called Social Innovation Camp, which I'll talk about a bit later. And so that's where it comes from. And then it also comes from this quote in Us Now, which, so the actual quote, I had to go and look up what the actual quote was. So I said, representative democracy is based on the assumption that people are thick, and that's just not true. And it was just one of those things that came out of my mouth, and I had absolutely no idea where it came from at the time. And the disadvantage was that I was on film when I said it. So everybody heard it. But the advantage of it being on film when I said it is that I've had to think a bit about what I meant, and is it true? And what I really meant was that putting decisions and the provision of public services into the hands of a small group of representative politicians, I think misses a massive, massive opportunity. Because there are millions and millions of people who could help with those things. And if you just sort of focus it down onto those representative politicians, then you're missing a trick, basically. That's what I meant by that quote. And I think we're starting to see a potentially huge kind of wave of creativity in the creation of public value, of social capital, from people understanding how to use cheap, widely accessible web-based tools to organize the real world. And that's basically what I want to talk about this evening. So who's a member of meetup.com? Is there anybody here who's a member? Yep. Well, just so you know, there are 290 meetups organized through meetup.com this week in Toronto. So there's 290 events going on with people meeting up around an interest this week in Toronto, and it's just going on all the time. There's thousands and thousands of them every night around the world, organized through Meetup, which is a very simple tool. And just in case you haven't sort of seen how it works, I thought I'd just tell you a story of how I sort of did set up one Meetup. So I'm a Meetup organizer in London, and I'm quite into the work of the Long Now Foundation, who are doing this crazy thing. They're building a clock that will keep time for 10,000 years. Which is a crazy, crazy idea. You know, the idea is to just get people to think about the long term and to try and think, if you're going to build something for 10,000 years, you've got to think about what the world is going to be like in 10,000 years. You know, are there going to be human beings around? You know, what kind of materials will you use? It just gets you thinking. So I thought, well, I'll try and find other people in London who might be interested in long-term thinking as well. So I set up a meetup, and it's very, very easy to do. And I have to admit, the first one wasn't entirely a success. There were 3 of us, which was more than I expected, actually, probably thinking about it. And 3 is a crowd, so I think that's a success. But that was 6 months ago, and there's now 150 members of the Meetup group. And every month, but we basically get about 50 people together in a venue and then in a pub, talking about like really long-term thinking. So the one we had recently was about synthetic biology. Which isn't something that I ordinarily talk about in the pub, but we got 50 people together and talked about synthetic biology and what that meant for the future. So these can be pretty niche. But I think what Meetup does is shows just how easy it is to organize people outside of kind of traditional structures, basically. And Meetup isn't the only thing. I mean, actually Facebook, which is obviously huge, is an incredible organizer of people. It's a massive amount of sports events are organised through Facebook, so whether that's kind of like kids soccer or whatever it is, it's a massive kind of infrastructure for social organising. So even for .com entrepreneurs like me, it's not very fashionable to talk about Facebook being great because everybody's basically got sour grapes about Mark Zuckerberg. But I actually think Facebook is great, but from a social perspective. And then there's Twitter as well, which is sort of everybody seems to have heard of in the last couple of months. But Twitter is being used increasingly for just organising events, just like I'm going to be here then, and people find it and so on. But my favourite is actually a site called thepoint.com, which isn't kind of that well known at the moment. But they're based in Chicago, and what the point is, it's based on the tipping point. So the idea is that you get to, there are some things that when you get to a certain point, they just happen because you've got enough support for them, and they flip over the point and they go. So basically what you can do is you say you've got an idea, something that you want to do, but it needs, let's say, $1,000. So you say, okay, I want this to happen, but I can only give $10. So I want to find another 100 people who will give $10, and then we can do it. And that's how the point works. And it takes a low auth of your credit card. So basically when you get to the end, then it just authorizes everybody's credit cards, the money moves over, and it theoretically happens. And people are using this to build new playgrounds for kids in neighborhoods. People are using it to raise money for charities. And the PR stunt that the guys who set it up did was that they set up one which was they wanted to build a glass dome over the city of Chicago for the winter. Which I think you might need here as well, actually.
I'll pay for that.
Well, it's billions, so oh, actually, you could. And they've got to. I mean, it's a silly idea, but they've got to $200,000 worth of like commitments for people to build this thing. But just think, if it wasn't a stupid idea, think if it was a serious idea. Think if it was a school. Think if it was a hospital or a doctor's surgery, or think if it was like a new railway. You could actually use the point to find the funds to build public services, real public services, not just like sort of some little thing. You could actually use this thing to build real infrastructure. So I love the point, and it's well worth checking out. But all these tools basically just keep on coming back. So it's really, really easy to organize stuff now, and it's because of like this cheap, simple technology. A subscription to Meetup as an organizer, as somebody going along to Meetup, you don't have to pay at all. But as an organizer, is only $12 a month. You think what it used to cost to sort of have social infrastructure. But also building these things in the first place. So building a Meetup or building a point is getting cheaper as well. And that's something I've learned through doing School of Everything. So, and I just want to contrast it with Demos actually. So the way I ended up at Demos was, when I was at university, I picked up a book in a bookshop, which was by Demos. It was a collection of essays. And I remember just reading it. I did physics at university, so I didn't think I was going to end up in public policy at all. And I just remember reading it and thinking, oh, like this idea is great because it's about the future. It sort of made me think about the future in a different way. That was what Demos was about for me. It was like trying to get people to think about the future in a different way by putting ideas out there. I loved it, and I thought that was great. And so eventually I ended up working there. But I actually think that model of kind of researching an area and then coming up with sort of an idea about what you could do about it is kind of gone now. I think basically it's out of date. And public policy tends to mirror that as well. You tend to like sort of go away and write a white paper and then come up with some recommendations to do it and so on. And I think there are some implications for that as well. Basically, technology means that putting an idea into practice can be done as cheaply as coming up with the idea in the first place. So I'm not giving away any confidences by saying that like a Demos sort of think tank project would cost tens of thousands of dollars. Let's say about like 50,000 Canadian dollars to do that project. Now, School of Everything cost us about 35,000 Canadian dollars to get to the point of like having a website, having a team, having a business plan, and being in serious discussion with investors about like the future. So we got to proof of potential of an idea for a socially valuable kind of website that wouldn't have looked out of place in the recommendations section of like a Demos pamphlet. I can quite imagine School of Everything being a recommendation from Demos. But with School of Everything, we got it to the point of it actually existing and having 1,000 members who were all teaching and learning each other for the same amount of money as we used to spend on writing a pamphlet. And if you think about how much government departments probably spend on writing policy reports, it's much, much more. So you can do things so cheaply now that I just think it starts to change how you should do public policy. And it was kind of realizing that the School of Everything had been so cheap to set up that got me thinking about Social Innovation Camp. I thought, well, if I've done it once, then why can't we kind of get loads of people doing it? So what Social Innovation Camp is basically what we do is we have a call for ideas for socially valuable web tools. That's the idea. And each time we've done it twice now. There's another one coming up. We've had like over 120 ideas submitted just by kind of members of the public for things that they want to see, websites they want to see that they think are socially valuable. And then we narrow that down and we pick the 6 best ones. And then basically we get 100 people together with a really diverse set of skills, but coders, designers, people who understand social problems, marketers, and we get them together for a weekend, and we basically give them booze, caffeine, and pizza, and say, you can't come out until you've built it. And so by the end of the Sunday afternoon, we have 6 working prototypes that have all been built for free. Everybody donates their time completely. 6 working prototypes and pitches that could go to somebody who might fund it. And we've done it twice, so we've got like 12 ideas, and of those, 5 are actually like funded social startups now, because you just accelerate something so quickly if you kind of really create a buzz around it. And Ivo is one of those actually, which is quite interesting. So I'd love to see something like Social Innovation Camp happening in Canada as well, because I think you can just kind of get stuff going so much more cheaply and so much more easily that can have a real social value if you use digital technologies in a way that just wasn't possible 5 years ago. So what does this all mean for ministers? That was I've done meetups. The other part of the title was ministers. I have to do a cheesy little bit about Obama. Every talk has to have a little bit about Obama. There's something that I'm still not quite sure people have grasped fully about the whole sort of rhetoric of Obama, which is the we element of it. I keep on seeing that there's just such focus on the charisma of the man and of him sorting out everything that I keep on worrying that people haven't got the idea of we that really comes from that campaign. And the quote that I always love is "We are the ones we've been waiting for," which was from Super Tuesday last year. And yeah, that's such a powerful idea to me. The idea that it's not Obama is going to come up with the idea that is going to solve like all of the problems that we find ourselves in now. There is not one idea. There are millions of ideas, and they're in the heads and the hands of everybody who's part of society. And that's really powerful, but I don't see politicians and public servants really getting that yet and kind of opening things up so as people can come up with ideas and take them themselves and put them into practice. And one of the things that I notice is that I see in London anyway, civil servants or people working in government who have all these side projects, like these little things that they do in their spare time, which they can't do through their job. So they might be organising like their block of flats or something to make sure that the old people there, somebody goes and checks up on them every few days, and they're using email to do that. But they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't come up with a policy about it. And it's all being done on the edges. It's kind of like a little secret society in London of kind of public servants who understand technology. And I think it's the analogy I would use for kind of senior civil servants or for ministers is I saw this. I was very lucky. I saw a bit from this film that's coming out later this year called Oceans, which I think is the most expensive documentary that's ever been made. It's costing $75 million, and it's taken them 8 years to make. And it's a film about the oceans, and they've spent all this time kind of filming these incredible species that nobody's ever seen before underneath the sea. But anyway, there's a bit in this preview that I saw which I'd never ever seen before. So you've all seen the shoal, the swarm, that kind of image, which everybody associates with the internet for some reason as well. And it's crazy. You look at a shoal, and it's something that's unpredictable and chaotic, but beautiful. And there's just a bit in this. They created what they call torpedo cam. So these small cameras that are on a torpedo, which they can steer. And in this bit of the film, for the first time, I saw what it looks like to be inside a shoal. And if you think about it, you've never seen that. You've never seen what it's like to be inside a shoal. You've seen the outside, but you've never seen inside. And for me, that's what ministers need to get. They need to be torpedo cams. They need to be inside the shoal, looking at how this stuff works in order to understand it, because you can't understand it from the outside. And so I think the next generation of political innovators are going to come from people who do this stuff day in, day out, and who understand the web tools, because you can't do it by looking at it from afar. You've got to be part of it. You've got to be inside the shoal. That's pretty much it for me, but I wanted to sort of bring it back to the personal, because a few weeks ago we did a mini social innovation camp that was just an evening with some drinks, and somebody came up with this idea there, which was, well, why can't I see on a map where all the first aiders are? Was just the start of the conversation, and we thought, don't know. And there was a guy there with a laptop and who can code pretty well, and so he mocked up a prototype of a website that could show all the first aiders and where they were at any particular time. It took him 15 minutes probably. And that idea has now been funded and is kind of moving forward. And if it works, we could save the NHS millions and millions of pounds, because if you could just go to a first aider rather than calling 999 in the UK, we could save millions and millions of costs. And it just came from an evening that really wasn't much different from this. It was just somebody had an idea. Why can't I see this? So that's what I want you to do tonight, in your conversations after I've shut up. I quite often call them itches. So think of an area of public service of life where you've got an itch, where there's something that's a bit niggly, that you don't like the way it is. It's kind of like you notice something, I don't know, something about when you visit a doctor or the way that you fill in a particular form or whatever it is. Think of an itch, yeah? And then think how you would scratch it, basically. Then think about what's the simplest, smallest thing that you could do that would get you closer to having a solution. So it might be setting up a Facebook group. I don't know. It might be sending an email to a few people and seeing what they think. And just think about some area that you care about, some area of public life, some area of social change, the environment, whatever it is that you care about, and think what's the smallest thing you could do to make that better. And basically, with this kind of group of people, we could actually come up with a whole set of kind of social innovations tonight that within a week, potentially we could have built. Within a month, we could have potentially funded. And within a year, if you look at the trajectory of some kind of internet startups, we could have scaled. And that's what I'm interested in at the moment. That's why I think there is real power in using technology to try and change public services and to try and change politics and government. So that's me.
That's great. Thank you. I think we got some questions going around the room, but I just want to go back to your original point around Demos and maybe it not being the best model of traditional think tanks with which to advance new policy ideas, because the School of Everything is actually based at a different kind of organization called the Young Foundation. I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about the differences between those two models.
Okay, so interestingly, the Young Foundation is run by the guy who founded Demos. The Young Foundation has two sides to it. It's very explicit how they work. They have a research side, which researches what they call unmet social needs. So they're trying to find the problems that aren't being addressed by government and so on. And then they have Launchpad, which basically creates organizations and institutions to fulfill those social needs. That's how it works. And Launchpad are investors in and backers of School of Everything. That's kind of like the sort of part of where we came from. They also back Social Innovation Camp. And I just think that to be honest, actually, they're still learning as well the power of the web. Because you can pilot real-world stuff, and it's still quite expensive. But just getting it, they're just starting to get into the web and how cheaply you can try stuff out on the web. But yeah, the Young Foundation I think are a really, really interesting model. And certainly, I'm not dissing Demos because they're fantastic, but they do need to catch up.
Probably do. Anyone have any comments to make or questions to Mark?
Yeah. I'm struck by this because for those who don't know me, I did organize a thing called Change Camp in January, and what we're doing is there was a session that we did there called Change Lab where we actually did build stuff. And the funny thing is that we framed that context in the way of reinventing, reimagining government in the age of participation. That's how we framed our event. So it's government-centric.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Government isn't right in the middle. And what you're talking about with Social Innovation Camp is government's off to the side somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm very intrigued about the relationship between social innovation and government 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, participatory government. Because a lot of what you talked about is something that I would expect to see that when in the Toronto context we talk about at the Centre for Social Innovation, where I have my office, at Social Innovation Generation at Mars. That's where they talk about these things. They don't talk about those things inside government, because inside government they're trying to think about how to use Facebook.
About how to use
They're trying to figure out how to use Facebook for the first time and how to actually
Put your
comment
email
on
address
the blog.
on
They're not thinking about, oh, well, maybe we just shouldn't be doing a bunch of things because they can be done better in other ways. So how do we support that? So I wonder if you can think about government as an enabling framework for social innovation and what the relationship is between them.
Yeah, so I was at a fascinating workshop on Friday, and which is about hacking education, was the title of it, and it was bringing together people from kind of school systems. This was in the US, plus kind of people who built sort of disruptive .com businesses in different spheres and so on, and just and people split into, quite quickly actually, into people who wanted to try and reform the current education system and use technology to do that, and people who wanted to reinvent it outside and then just get the system to adapt, basically. I'm more in the latter camp, generally. That's just my instincts in terms of how I go about doing things. I try to do things outside of government and sort of public money and then come in. But I do think that if government is going to keep up with all that stuff, they have to have like basically some way of seeding like lots of ideas and then a way of evaluating them. And then what government can do really, really well is scale. Yeah, once something has been proven, government is, over the years has done one thing well, is like spend big amounts of money. And, well, it hasn't done it well, but that's the point where government comes in for me. Is like basically seeding, choosing, because they're democratically elected, let's not forget, and then scaling. But maybe not coming up with the ideas themselves in the first place. That's where they may well be weak.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, what has changed to make that approach? So you talk about cost.
Yeah.
But I'm interested also in the environment in terms of the kinds of problems that we have to solve, and a programmatic approach. So you have the production system of policy, and it goes through its production system of multiple years, and then it produces a program, and that program goes through a number of iterations of development until something is ready for people to apply to. And then somebody evaluates applications to this program, say, oh, that's a good project, that's a bad project, and invests a lot of money into that thing, and then outcome comes out, at the end sometimes maybe. It's not being fair, but it's also, a snapshot. Now, compared to what you just described is just seed lots of things, and then let the good stuff emerge and then support that in terms of scale. What's the difference in terms of why you would do that, and how government reorients itself to actually be able even to think about doing that?
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, because just the whole of government is set up not to do that. So in some ways, I guess that's why I'm doing it outside, because how would I kind of like come up with these things and really interact with government? I mean, we do. Actually, the money that funds Social Innovation Camp is indirectly public money. It's through Nesta, which is and so they've been slightly enlightened in terms of seeing that you can use a small amount of money to create lots and lots of ideas, but then none of the projects have actually been taken on by government departments. They've all been taken on by charitable foundations or by angel investors and so on. They haven't gone back into government again. So it's the kind of how do they interface with ideas as they're developing that I think is where there's a real lack of interface, I don't know.
You won't change them.
Well, that's generally been my...
You can't. You are a generation, and I'm going to be intrigued with what happens to you.
You're in
No,
it too.
you are the product of great education.
Yeah.
New technologies that were there, the tools that were there. You didn't invent, somebody else did, but they were there, and you guys sort of intuited how to use them. So there was affluence, education, a certain generation, a certain time, and here you are, arriving at the time of the collapse of global capitalism, and of and at a time when we are actually slipping back down the Maslowian hierarchy. I mean, you guys are at the top of the hierarchy, right? I say to Peter, like I did polling, you guys are the next generation, which is actually my random sample, actually not being bothered at all hours of the day, but actually come out or connecting to each other and actually helping solve the problem and connecting to each other, often exchanging without any payments,
Yeah.
and being the next phase of our democracy. But you have arrived at a very interesting time. Because right now, the risk that we had shifted out, to capitalism or to the nonprofits and the foundations, let me tell you guys, like there are foundations that are worth a third to a half of what they were last year, and that's 08, then there's 09. there was money behind DeMoss. There was money behind this. A lot of people made a lot of money. They were sick of the right being the only people creating new ideas for the last quarter century. They say it's time for the left and a middle way, a third way, and all that stuff. And then you young people come and say, yeah, boy, and we can take you at light speed into a whole new way of generating ideas and of organizing, self-organizing. But right now, boy, I tell you, government is looking pretty good because the risk is now the taxpayer, and the taxpayer is being asked to bail everybody out. So it's interesting that we're kind of moving back to trying to hang on to the social welfare state that we built for 50 years. And I'm so sad because there are a lot of people hurting. Like, I don't know, you guys have jobs, or you've got angel investors, I don't know who they are, right? And you're starting new businesses now, but it's a very tough time. And I'm, you know, is it 5 years? Is it 10? Is it just 2 years in a blip? What if it's 5 years, guys? What if it's 10? You know,
hiring?
and I don't want you know, you're a generation. There are these generations, right? So, how will you help us, the world, the Western world, Canada, United States, Britain, the rest of us, the world? Because if Nigel Ferguson's right, like, it's pretty frightening. And you know, and I don't have the answer. When I heard you, I thought I could have heard you 2 years ago, and I would have said, great, okay guys, how are we gonna do it? But something's happened, and it's not done. It's not done. So what's your thought about and I say your role generationally, it doesn't matter about your age. It matters about your values and your talents and your sensibilities. Guys, how do you help yourselves and us get through this bloody mess, given your talents and sensibilities? What do you think, Paul?
Well,
That's why we put the light.
I just think, I mean, just coming at it from a sort of an internet perspective, it's a great time to start a business, because there's none of the fluff. There's none of the kind of, like, you know, the flotsam and jetsam on the top. It's the serious stuff. It's the stuff that has real social value. That I'm a strong believer that social value drives economic value, not the other way around. That you need to be producing something that people find really, really valuable, and that is socially valuable if you want to sort of demonstrate, you know, profitability and economic value. And some of the greatest businesses were forged in, like, you know, 2001, which was, you know, .com collapse supposedly, but that's when people were setting up the really interesting. That's when Meetup was set up, you know, and so on. So I think it's a great time to be trying to do this, but then, you know, it does feel like kind of ping pong ball on the ocean in terms of, yeah, how much impact we can actually have. But yeah, no businesses, no kind of projects even have scaled as quickly as internet projects in human history. Yeah, we have never had this power to, like, kind of reach more people ever. And so the potential for this stuff to actually, like, have a big impact and make a big change on the way that people kind of live their lives, hopefully for the better, I think is really great. That's why I'm in it.
I want to build on that and connect the points you made, you know, with your Obama moment, that you know, Rahm Emanuel was going around saying a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. But if we're losing the kind of we-ness that fueled the campaign, it seems like the public is really being put to waste. The public is being put to the unemployment lines, and it's not clear yet what sort of clever policies are going to come out of recovery.gov that really harness the sort of enabling technologies you described to address the sort of economic cliff Michael's alerting us to.
Yeah, I mean, so we have this idea at the moment. I don't know what the equivalent is in Canada, but so there's a big retail chain in the UK called Woolworths, which went bust November, I think, last year. No, it was after Christmas. It must have been after Christmas. January must have been. So there's all these empty stores. I think there's like 400 of them in the UK. They're huge, great stores. I mean, they're always massive. So we've got this idea basically to borrow some Woolworths stores, which are empty, and basically to run social innovation camps, but for 6 months, so that they are basically training camps essentially for how you start this stuff up. Like, so we take 50 people with a diversity of skills, all of whom don't have jobs at the moment, and we get them together. We basically, because there is such a surplus of kind of good skills at the moment out there. Get them together, organise them, basically set them up the projects to work on, and then get outside expertise in as mentors and as kind of like as and when they needed it, whether they need lawyers and all those kinds of things. And again, it's just a very, very cheap way compared to the sort of incubators of old, of training people up in how to like make their own jobs rather than take a job that probably isn't there. And so that's something that we're working on. And I think certainly talking to people in New York last week is something that a lot of people are thinking about, is how do you use this kind of expanding amount of dead retail space and dead office space in a really creative and kind of capacity building way.
Because we're describing as much a kind of structural transformation of the economy, something that's, the old jobs aren't coming back, so there's going to have to be new kinds of sectors, new kinds of industries. And I think your point that being the most educated generation, well, that talent is up for grabs now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just needs attitude. I mean, basically, talent is kind of useless on its own unless it's got attitude, and so in a productive sense anyway. So I just think that the talent that is in London, in my case, in terms of like that's the sort of the area that East London I spend working. It just needs attitude.
So you guys could be your own venture capitalists then, right?
Pretty much.
You think that there is an energy and a capacity that you can actually, because there's no money now, right? The banks aren't lending,
No.
the vulture capitalists, I don't know what they're doing, but they're pretty well gone. If you can you're saying you can self-organize, and you can be phoenixes coming out of these ashes, while the taxpayers are bailing out General Motors' funded liability pension plan. In the meantime, you guys are actually going to create new businesses. You're going to do it, and you can do it because you'll connect other people who will see this, and they'll give you a lot of ideas and even some money, and you'll actually have some good, and you'll come out of this creating jobs, ideas, and so on. And I think that's a very interesting idea, that you have a capacity or resources that aren't apparent to the old economy.
Yeah.
And I think that will be, you'll create your own BlackBerry, your own research in motion. That they're there, you're going to create them, and they're going to create wealth, and they're going to create jobs, and they're going to improve the world. And believing that, I think, is just a wonderful thing. And of course, your friend Obama says believing it is sort of, you've got to start with that, right?
Yeah.
It's an intriguing idea.
Rohan, you're nodding.
Yeah, I'd like to actually follow on to the conversation today. I'm one of those people who is extremely disappointed in all the politicians, Obama included. I do not see any kind of effective response to the crisis. But I'm at the same time, very optimistic, as you are, about the new possibilities now. And I was fortunate enough to be at Change Camp, and I'm very excited about what can be done. Where I'm disappointed in is in the political class, let's call it. I'm not disappointed in the public servants, though. And they're the ones who really run the show at the end of the day. So I'd like to ask you the same question that I asked the panel after Mass LBT organized the initial screening of Us Now. I asked the panel a question. I'd like to ask you the same question. Is it possible for us to ask for the public to work with, more or less directly with the public service, bypassing the political class entirely? Is there a way to do that? Because they, of course, do have all that money. Ultimately, they control the money. And we do want our hands on that money once the right ideas have been identified.
Blimey. Yeah, I mean, it certainly is possible. It tends to be, well, the other advantage of all this is that it is small amounts of money. And in my experience, politicians don't tend to get interested in something until it's a big amount of money. So you can go a long, long way with lots of small amounts of money. which actually you do see in the UK, and that's the other sort of trait of the secret society in the UK government who do understand technology, is that they give out small amounts of money. So there's an organisation called My Society, which has been going for about 5 years, I guess, and it's all about basically using technology to make government more transparent and to help citizens connect with government in a way that they never have been able to before. My Society is a fantastic organisation, and they've worked with the Cabinet Office to create this thing called Power of Information Review, which is about kind of what government information is useful to the techie community, basically, so that they can build upon. And one of the things they did with that was set up a program that's called Show Us a Better Way. I think it's showusabetterway.gov.uk or something like that. And it was a bit like Social Innovation Camp. It was like basically pitch your idea for what we should be doing with government technology. And this is civil servants. There's one politician who's involved, but he's a different case in that he's the biggest geek I know. And they said, okay, well, and we will give like basically £10,000 worth of development time to the best idea, which were judged by quite a good panel actually. And they're doing that again now. So basically they're giving out small amounts of money for ideas that improve government. And it's way outside of the political discourse in terms of, it doesn't get any mainstream media attention at all, as far as I can see. It's just known about in the geek community, basically. But it's a very, very good program. I definitely think it's a good thing.
But I want to push you on that point, and a moment that I think made a lot of people uncomfortable when they watched Us Now. If they knew British politics and they sympathized with progressives and they watch Ed Miliband, the young, very talented minister, make a really fumbled defense of the status quo. Yeah. And then we watch George Osborne, the shadow chancellor, look too cool, too calm by half in saying, actually, we do need to let go. The command and control thing, monopolizing representation, we need to incorporate these technologies. So given that, I think many people, the center or center left, would say, hey, this kind of joined up thinking belongs to us. Oh, right. This kind of progressive popular spirit, this ought to be ours. They watch a young guy like Ed Miliband get all tangled in a knot and they go, ooh.
Well, the politician who I talked about is a Labour politician. He's just not that good looking. So he's never going to end up, as the Ed Miliband or the David Miliband of the Labour Party. But
is that how it works?
Well, it's
TV.
It is. I mean, Us Now was on screen, but if you were to read Tom Watson's blog and so on, he gets this stuff. He's fantastic, and he's a minister. Yeah, there is. I think the Labour Party is way, way behind in the UK in terms of understanding technology, which is really, really sad because, the other thesis that people might have seen me doing before is that, I really do think that political parties are on their way out unless they can reinvent themselves quite fundamentally, and I think the Labour Party are way off that. I don't think they've understood the way that that people interact with, organisations, websites, anything. I'm not sure that the Tories are much farther ahead, actually. I think George Osborne kind of has had a few meetings with Eric Schmidt from Google and kind of, he gets it. But I don't think they're that much further ahead. They certainly, if you look at what they're doing practically, they've got a YouTube channel. That's it. I mean, they're not doing anything radical. They certainly, compared to my Barack Obama or the tools that the Obama campaign was using, the Tories are way, way behind. So I just think basically it's not that the Labour Party hasn't got it and Tories have. It's British politics hasn't got it.
Right. Maybe we'll keep you up here for 3 or 4 more minutes, and then we can get another
drink.
Keep talking.
Yeah, I've got a burning critical question. I don't mean to dampen your optimism, but I briefly perused your pamphlet on open policy.
Oh, right, okay.
And that concept.
Don't hold me to that. That was 8 years ago.
So using the idea of the Web 2.0 as the forum for engaging the public in policy making, there are some kind of critical concerns that came to mind, and then I want to give you the opportunity to touch on these. That, to my mind, using the internet as a forum for public conversation or for contributing to policy making for governments or other organizations is that, for one thing, it's an anonymous forum in that people who come on there with different intentions. They don't have that same sense of direct accountability to each other. The fact that it's not face-to-face connection between a group of people means that arguably it's not really a dialogue, it might be a debate, but you don't have the same elements of maybe social learning and building of trust that can happen in participatory democracy. And the other thing is that that technology is sort of exclusive in that it excludes the most vulnerable populations, the most marginalized people in the public who have the most, typically have the most stake in government decision-making and policies. And are still those directly affected, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity or the skills or the accessibility to participate in that kind of forum.
Yeah, well, that was 7 years ago, and I would pretty much disown it now. I think, I think I was wrong, and I think that the idea that it's enough to open up policy-making processes to the public is wrong. I think you need to do much, much more. You need to actually have real participation, and so just sort of taking the same policy-making process and just opening it up a bit to the public, I would go much, much further now. But then that was, people were like, whoa. It was like 7 years ago. It was kind of like you didn't have any government blogs or email addresses, probably. I don't know, but I would say today I would say that you need to go much, much further if you really want to engage with people, and you need to be much, much more inclusive, and you shouldn't be talking about policy for starters, because that in itself is exclusive of a whole swathe of society.
Why don't we take it like a flurry of comments here, and I know there's something back here as well, and these people over here. But so why don't we just zoom that way and we'll collect everyone's thoughts.
Just a quick question. Have you ever sort of taken on a company or government who was posing to look at a problem, and you guys have taken the same problem outside of the government sort of systems or company systems in place, and just said, look, we're going to do this 10 times faster and come up with a better solution than you're going to do in a year. So, just to show government what can be done if they sort of,
No, I haven't, but My Society is a really interesting one. So they do that quite often. So they basically redesigned the Parliament website in the UK, but by setting it up so that it's called theyworkforyou.org. And if you go to They Work For You, basically they managed to scrape all of the data from Parliament and from all the TV channels and all the radio, everything that covers Parliament, and put it into one place so you can look at a single page for a member, and kind of it gives you everything that they've said, everything they've voted on, their email address, absolutely everything, everything that should be on the Parliament website, and they built it outside it. And they get more traffic than the Parliament website. Probably, I don't know, that might not be true. But and what's happened now is that the Parliament website has started to incorporate the good stuff from They Work For You. So there are definitely examples of organisation. My Society, I would definitely look at My Society for examples of where they've just thought, this is crap, we'll do it better, and then government comes and copies it.
And where do they get their funding from?
Government. Bizarrely, they got their seed funding. They got their seed funding from a kind of sort of benefactor to start off with, but they're actually more and more now funded by government because the specific projects that the government. So I don't know if you heard about the Number 10 petition site. So My Society built a petition site for Number 10. So it was a contract for them to provide it for Number 10. And it just went absolutely ballistic. And so the Number 10 was getting absolutely inundated because it was so easy to use. It was so kind of good. So they got 25 million people signing a petition about road pricing and things like that. So there are problems with My Society working directly with government where it goes wrong. But in general, they're pretty good at doing things better.
All right, so thinking about what's been spoken so far this evening, I offer a hypothesis that there's a difference between how technology will affect the business of getting elected, electioning, and how it will affect any kind of imposition of technology on bureaucracy is somewhat forced and artificial, and that's why we can sort of look back on dirt time and see the same, see the argument still in place. But there's something maybe long-lasting or permanent about how bureaucracy functions in terms of power relations and such, but that elections is very different, and probably we'll never see another television-based decision in elections anymore now that Obama's won and that's done. And after Kennedy, we had 40, 50 years or such, I think, you know.
Yeah.
But that there's just a fundamental difference in how technology is going to affect those two different sides of the political coin.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't really talked about getting elected in terms of using technology. I think it's very, very close to marketing, though. I think there's much more kind of similarity between sort of business marketing and getting elected using technology. I mean, yeah, there's obviously new tools that you can use, but I mean, so there's an interesting stat I saw about the Obama campaign was, there was all this coverage of like all the new tools they were using. So they're using Facebook, they were using iPhone apps and all this kind of stuff. 90% of the communication that they did was email. It was just direct email. It wasn't high tech, the whole thing. It wasn't like Web 2 at all. It was email. And I don't think that's going to change for a while, to be honest. Like, it's just so much easier and so much more kind of like, it's about it's about convincing people, not about kind of getting their opinions ready, isn't it?
Heavily personalized.
Yeah, heavily personalised, but nonetheless, basically, it's about convincing people. It's not a creative act to try and sort of create something, to sort of get somebody to vote for you.
I mean, yeah.
Picking up on this distinction between the political bureaucratic divide and dealing with the bureaucratic side, I'm wondering if you could comment on some of the tensions between institutional identities and then groups of interested individuals. I work in international development for an NGO that's largely funded by CETA, and we have some, and I do knowledge sharing there, so that's a lot of, ideally we would have a really leading edge website as a part of that, but there's some real tensions in going from the brainstorming session with all of our partners to implementation when everything that goes on that website has to be approved by the bureaucracy. And I know some of the people who are the officers there, and it's not that they're retrograde individuals, but it's that sort of sense of this website speaks on behalf of the institution. And so as I see it, in order to really create change there'd have to be a complete loosening up of that mentality and a complete paradigm shift.
Well, the way to do it is don't do it on your website. So do it on somebody else's, which is basically what all the sort of smart things I've seen are basically say, you do it on Facebook, or you do it on, there's a site called Get Satisfaction, which is about customer service and all this kind of stuff, or you just set up a wiki on some sort of hosted site, and then it's obviously not like from the opinion of the organisation, but it can be like a really rich discussion. And
but aren't we talking about how this can translate into changing public policy?
Yeah, but then it's up to you to to take that back to the institution. Do you see that you still need the bridges, you still need the people. This is why I don't think like civil servants or the people who work in aid agencies or whatever it might be are going to disappear, because it still needs that interface. It really, really needs it. It needs to be really smart to bring the debate and the interesting stuff and the valuable stuff out of the interwebs or whatever you want to call them, back into the institution. And so it's a really skilled job.
And a quite circuitous one.
It's you need to understand swarms, which is not easy.
And I think you also have to understand how to curate your work
Yes,
as
yeah,
well, because
it is curation.
Demos did a lot by producing pamphlets that looked like this, which had catchy titles, and it made the transmission of ideas a little less, there's less friction, right? And so now that you're able to produce a documentary very quickly and throw it online, or you're able to put together an event, or you're able to do a full-out prototype, I think policymakers want stuff to talk about and want stuff to be able to point to. And so you're able to play a more sophisticated game by simply feeding those policymakers with new things to look and point at. And because the cost of creating those things has diminished so significantly, I think it can help at least to accelerate the metabolism in the public sector for new ideas. The challenge is still making them stick and getting them to go deep, right?
Yeah.
Rather than kind of floating around in the kind of ephemeral and cool space. Yeah. But I think it's easier than it's ever been to maybe get ideas.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not a either or between, like, you know, the institution having these big hard walls that nobody can get through, or there being no walls. It's about basically the walls have become kind of permeable in strange ways that we don't understand yet. And that's what's going on. So again, this workshop I was at last week, something weird happened that I'd never seen before, but I can imagine happening in government sort of stuff. So it was a workshop. It was like a kind of policy seminar. In fact, it sort of scared the hell out of me when I walked in, because I was like, whoa, blast from the past. And so 30 people round the table, all talking. It was invitation only. But they were very clear at the beginning that everything was on the record and that everything probably would spread outside of the room. And everybody was twittering away, you know, and sort of all this kind of stuff. We had this big screen at one end of the wall, at one end of the room, which was the Twitter search for the term, which was like #HackEDU. That was the thing. And so we started off like twittering, and people were twittering like interesting things that people were saying. This was at 10 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, we started noticing that people from outside were twittering in with that hashtag as well. And then we started trending on Twitter, if you know what that is. So at one point, we were the 4th most talked about topic on Twitter in the world, which has, whatever, 80 million at the moment users or something like that. So this tiny little seminar of 30 people, okay, they were all sort of Twitteraholics and so on, and it was, but we suddenly had this kind of permeable relationship with the outside world, where, you know, anybody could contribute to the debate, and they were all telling jokes as well, which kept on distracting us. But, you know, it was there's new ways of like old kind of setups and formats becoming permeable to the outside world that I think I'd hope to think we see a lot more of.
To what effect?
To the effect of better decisions, I think. And
About what in that instance?
well, in that instance, it was about investment. So the workshop was organised by a venture capital firm. You know, no holds barred. They want to make an investment in education, and they want that decision to be as well informed as they possibly could. So they got a bunch of experts together in the room, and then they got the whole world who were interested to feed into it as well.
And they got what they wanted.
Well, they haven't. I mean, you'd have to ask them. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, certainly they were very kind of pleased with the way it went. I don't know whether they, but yeah.
I want to wrap with, is there a final comment or question?
I'm afraid to speak because it has to do with consulting, and there's either consultants or user of consultants in this room. No, it's how do you get to the point where both the governments and the people they employ to look for information and get ideas to quickly move to these things? Because governments, I don't think any other order of government is any different than municipal government. We don't work on paradigm shifts, even when there's a party change. Governments work on creeping incrementalism.
Yeah.
City Hall, Paul won't know, there's a councillor who's been dead for decades now, Dan Leckie. And City Hall is full of what I call Leckyites in the towers, still on the second floor, all over the place, still trying to implement his ideas through creeping incrementalism. It's that slow. So, to me, and I'll sound like a non-progressive right-winger when I say this, but part of the problem is we work on this situation of when we go to analyze something, decide if we should move forward and do things, we hire consultants. And there's this relationship, I'm not saying don't hire consultants, but there's relationships that happen again and again where they're trying to please us and get the contract. We are looking for who's the best, but they're trying to please us. And so we all keep saying, let's have a charrette. The same way we always have a charrette. We go out looking for who's going to do this environmental assessment. Well, okay, they got a really big contract to do the TTC one, and they did it this way, so let's do it that way so we get the contract. So we're locking each other, the users of the consultants and the consultant themselves, into this relationship that says don't innovate. I've only seen it once happen in this whole massive capital program that we're doing here now. One team said that if we're asking about a transit system, what if we had the environmental assessment consultation right in a subway station to ensure that we were actually talking to users? And that was one tiny little innovation in that whole process, but it's the only innovation I've seen, and I've been in City Hall for 6 years now.
Yeah.
So how do you unlock that relationship and create this safe zone of, you know what, bid on this, but say something new, goddammit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my friend Tom has this great idea, which certainly hasn't happened in the UK, but I wish it would. So obviously massive IT infrastructure, capital projects going on all the time in the UK.
Yeah.
Costing millions and millions and millions of pounds. And some of them, you sit down with coders and they say, I could have built that. You know, and sometimes you don't know whether they're like lying or not. But Tom's idea was, if you're going to put out to tender a contract for an IT project that is over a certain amount, let's say over £1 million, that you should basically give the job to 2 coders for 10 days and see how far they get. That before you're allowed to put it out to tender. And he thought that basically you could probably save.
Say what a code is.
A coder, so somebody, a programmer, a computer programmer, somebody building a piece of software.
Yes,
rather than
something else.
Okay,
in
right. So,
circles, yeah.
and you'd save the 4 months as well.
Huge. That's a huge change.
I think you answered your own question now. You know, you're wondering how you get the different answer. Maybe you're just asking for the wrong services.
But to get the whole branded institution, be it a government or a large NGO, to ask new questions is
really hard.
But that's what you should be asking for.
I also have, I don't see a lot of politicians involved in making decisions on tender projects because the sense is politicians are not involved at all. And
no, post-MFP we're not supposed to be in it.
No,
Maybe that's the problem.
You're not involved, and the idea is that really, if the risk you run is the more you profess an idea or a point of view, the less likely you are to win a contract. So that's the world we live in. If you want to know.
There's a reason why a lot of consultants don't pitch on government contracts, speaking from experience, because it's a box that looks like this and they want it this way. So, why don't you look for the people that aren't the traditional ones to respond and ask the bigger question?
The interesting thing is that government people have no idea how to write a request for proposal. No idea how to write it. If you can engage a community in this city that is among the best in the world around design, around technology, around innovation, and you can basically open source the RFP. You can say, help us write the RFP for this thing. Then you can bid on it.
Yeah, it's a good
See,
idea.
Paul won't know that. We're closed off to all of these new ways of doing these things by post-MFPism.
Well,
We really have. We've locked ourselves out of it by over-interpreting what actually, if you really read the judgment, it's not that, it doesn't imply that many constraints, but we've over-interpreted and imposed them on ourselves, in my view. So we've stopped involving ourselves, so we can't inject the innovation that perhaps we should.
Canadian heritage. You have it on your name tag. Come on. On behalf of the federal government.
I'm here to help.
Oh, and we got the PCO popping up over there. All right, now let's get into it. Good. Well, Pat first here, Debbie.
I think what we've got is a failure. I honestly think there's a growing gulf of misunderstanding. Peter and I just worked on a project that was working with youth from across the hemisphere who are using arts to engage at-risk youth, organization American States. And we failed to build in some upfront assumptions, and we realized the gulf that we were shouting across eventually, was so big maybe we didn't get the outcomes we wanted.
I've increasingly come to understand that in this area, working with social innovators, it's the same thing. Policy 2.0, as for all the reasons you pointed out, is a bit of a bridge too far right now. Government is not into systems where there are not yet standards. They're not into risk capital. At the best, hopefully, you're a good manager and you create a little skunk works on the side and you place a couple, as you suggest, educated bets and you hope that they pay off and then you scale them. But that's not your business writ large. Policy 2.0, when it was e-government, we were talking about transparency and accountability, great. But applying concepts from the open source movement to open policy, it's just not mature there. We don't have the mutual understanding necessary of systems. So often the 2.0 policy camps will gravitate towards the communication technology, to elements of collaboration, to the sexy parts of it, while not doing sufficient work on understanding what policy structures they need to feed into and what is digestible by that beast. And we, on the policy side, probably do not do enough in, as you've already suggested, opening up our systems to be able to collaborate properly.
Yep.
But I think it's not one or the other. It's a two-sided equation here.
PCO?
Well, I just want to make a few points. One is that I don't think you can just paint all public servants with one stroke. There are pockets of innovation, even in contexts which are incredibly regressive and repressive. There are pockets of innovation and people who are trying to make things work in a different way. And at the federal level, there's work going on to lay a groundwork for engaging citizens in policymaking with collaborative tools. And contrary to my friend from Environics, I think this is a great opportunity. This time is a great opportunity to use social media for social change. I think it's an opportunity, and I think we should grab it and take it and run with it, because I think it just will open up all kinds of doors for us and for our citizens.
Cool. Cool. Well, I think that's probably a good place to park it.
We've been sitting down later.
I know, this is realizing the kind of injustice of this. But I want to thank you, Paul. This is your third trip to Canada, and anytime you're close by, it's a treat to get us on your flight path. And I hope you'll meet a lot of other people and have met other people this evening who will keep in touch and follow your Twitter feed and invite you back for other occasions as well. And certainly when you're in the UK, I know that both Paul, the School of Everything, and the Young Foundation would be really happy to see you there as well. It's a great crossroads for people having these conversations all the time. I should also just quickly thank, in conclusion, IPAC, the Institute for the Public Administration of Canada, as well as the British Council, to Friends of Mass, and for their support in this first discussion. We're going to try and do this every 4 to 6 weeks as different people kind of come our way and as different ideas come to mind. But in the spirit of this evening's first event, we'll make this a kind of open source effort. And so if you have ideas or people that you would like to have us convene a conversation around or for, let us know. And otherwise, thanks just a ton for coming in this evening as we start. Yeah, thank you.
Can I have a point now?
You can have a
No, this is just I thought I was coming on holiday. He said, like, come for a couple of days, you know, you can chill out. And then he said, would you mind doing this talk? I mean,
Ratcheting up the favors to see how excited you are.
yeah.